Our last formula that we want to look at is a sphere. And a sphere is basically a ball. It's like a three-dimensional circle. And the equation for a sphere is 4 pi r squared. So I'm just going to plug in whatever my radius is. So in this case, the radius was 4. So I'll plug in 4 squared times 4. That's going to give me 64 pi. That's going to be inches squared. So make sure I'm paying attention to the units. There are lots of little small places here. We could lose some points. We're going to pay attention to the units to make that inches squared. And then also the exact answer is 64 pi. If we wanted you to round, that would be in the My Math Lab directions. You could type in 64 pi using the pi button on your calculator to get that answer. For any handwritten work that I have you turn in, you're going to want to use the exact answer. So leave it as pi. Now on to a tricky problem. I think this one's tricky because we don't have a picture that goes with it. So I find that tricky. So we want to find the surface area of a square pyramid. They give us the base, area of the base, and then the height. So I drew a picture. You do not have to draw a picture. That's not required, but for some people that does help. So I started with the base. It told me that it was a square pyramid. So that means the base is side squared right there. So that's side times side. So side squared was equal to 196. So I took the square root of that to give me 14. So I knew that this pyramid had a 14 by 14 base. Now here's where it gets tricky. They gave me the height instead of the lateral height. And for a pyramid, I have to have the lateral height. So they gave me this height that's right here in the middle. So they said the height was 24 centimeters. I need this height over here, the lateral height. I do not need this thing that's sticking up. You can imagine like a popsicle stick coming straight up. I don't need that. So I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem to find my lateral height. So I need a right triangle. All the way across was 14. Remember, that was the base, was 14. I don't want it all the way across. I want to be able to go to this height. Remember, the height's in the middle of, it's the perpendicular bisector. It's right in the middle. So halfway, if all the way across is 14, halfway across is 7. And I can tell you every single time the lateral height is going to be your hypotenuse. So the lateral height is going to be my C over here. So that means 24 has to be my other side of my triangle, my other leg of my triangle. So 7 squared again, because that's halfway across to that perpendicular bisector. 24 because it's the height, and I'm going to solve for L. So that's going to give me 625 is equal to L squared, taking the square root of both sides. So if I take the square root of both these sides, that gives me L is 25. So now I know that a whole side, the base is 25. Sorry, the base is not 25. So I know that the base is 14 here. So this base here is the 14 all the way across. And the lateral is 25 because I did all that Pythagorean theorem. Remember, the hypotenuse is always going to be the C squared. So that gives me 175. Now there are 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles. So that gives me 700. Almost done. The 700 from the triangle plus the 196 from the square base gives me my final answer of 896 centimeters squared. Now, if you totally understood that, that's fine. You can go ahead and stop the video. But I know some people have questions about finding this lateral height. So let me draw a shape in here for us. So I'm going to just draw a triangle, if it lets me. Let me try something else here. So let's, there we go. So here's our triangle. We have to have a right triangle in order to use the Pythagorean theorem. We also know that the perpendicular bisector, perpendicular means it makes a right triangle. So I'm using a right triangle inside of this pyramid. So to make this height, this is the perpendicular bisector, it can't go all the way across. So think about a pyramid has these big triangles. We don't want the whole big triangle, we just want half of it. So that's where I got the 7 from. The 7 all the way across was 14. All the way across here would be 14, but I want to cut it in half to make this right here be 7. Now the height I gave us was 24. So this height right here was 24. And the lateral height is always on the outside of a pyramid. I'm just going to scroll back up to one of our previous pages where we had a pyramid here. Our lateral was on the outside right here. So that's how I know that the lateral is my c squared, because it always has to be on the outside. So this was half of my base, this was my height, and then that was the lateral, the hypotenuse. And it's always going to work like that.